Greetings from New York City and Columbia Business School Executive Education. My name is Scott Gardner. Very happy to be here today with my friend, Professor Hitendra Wadhwa, for the Anatomy of a Great Leader webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few quick logistics. If you'll look at your screen now, a recording will be sent to you of this webinar. If you'd like to tweet about the webinar, please do so at #CBSExecEd. And finally, and most importantly, please upload those questions throughout the webinar, and we'll get to as many of those as possible in the last 10 minutes and in our The Conversation Continues section. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Hitendra Wadhwa. He is the Professor of Practice at Columbia Business School, where he teaches MBA courses and executive programs on personal leadership and success and driving strategic impact. He is the founder of the Institute for Personal Leadership, which helps individuals, leaders, and organizations with leadership development and cultural transformation based on the science of personal leadership. He is also the recipient of the Dean's Award for Teaching Excellence and numerous other awards at Columbia University. Hitendra, it's great to be with you today. I know you have a lot of material to cover, so I'm going to rejoin you in the last 10 minutes. Good?
Are you going to leave me?
I'm going to leave you.
You're not going to leave me just by myself.
I know you can do this. You got it. So I'll see you in the last 10 minutes for the Q&A, okay?
Thank you,
Great.
Scott.
Have a good webinar.
I appreciate it. Hello, and a warm welcome to all of you in this webinar on the anatomy of a great leader. You know, if you think about leadership, it is under siege right now. The kinds of challenges that we face in corporations, in government, in society in general, and the kind of burden that it imposes on people in positions of leadership, and the kind of missteps that from time to time we see some of our leaders take, that we struggle with in our own careers and our own responsibilities, is coming out of a place today where there is so much change, so much uncertainty, so much volatility that I think every leader is facing a huge amount of pressure and burden to figure out, hey, listen, what is my game here? What is the path to success here? What are the principles of the past that I should continue to practice, and what are some changes and shifts and new things I need to take on in order to be successful in this fast-changing environment? Does that make sense so far? All right, so in that context, the question that comes up is, well, what is our view of what an ideal leader's profile should look like today? In general, when I look at what the research is on this, coming both from a combination of academia as well as from industry, the approach that has been taken in the last several decades has been to find access to data sets where you can see the success trajectory or the failure trajectory of a population of leaders, managers, and employees in organizations, for example, and then to correlate that with certain attributes of those people, and then to do the classic kind of regression model to identify which are the variables that are predictive of success, right? And when you do that, you come up with your model for leadership. And then another piece of research by another community will come up with their model of leadership. And then there'll be like this third model of leadership. And to that end, you just have to Google what are the top traits of a leader. And you will see how proliferated that sort of whole that whole enterprise is of research based on correlating attributes of character and personality, etc., with what success might look like as a leader. Now, the challenge with that in today's world is that this model is starting to get more and more complicated. In what way? For instance, it is at this point very clear that a leader today has to be very adaptive, very open to change in an ever-changing world. But on the other hand, we also know, for example, from this great research done by a bunch of people codified in this book called Grit, for example, that leaders have to be very tenacious. You have to be able to fight the good fight and keep going. Isn't that almost, in a sense, like the opposite of being adaptive? Leader has to be, in some ways, very decisive. You have to, at the end of the day, eliminate the din of all the opinions and views out there and come to a point of closure and firmness about the direction forward so that people have clarity about where they have to go. But on the other hand, a leader also has to be very patient. A leader has to be able to, in a sense, wait it out and think it through and not rush to judgments and allow things to unfold organically as, as conditions kind of develop in a certain way, etc., right? Be decisive, but also at the same time be very patient. Be a risk taker. Be open to failure. Be, kind of putting forth a path towards success that is laden with innovation and creativity, but that means you have to take risks. But on the other hand, don't take too many risks. You got to manage those risks. You got to be in a place where you don't bet the farm. Be very thoughtful about your portfolio of investments, right? You have to be very connected in today's world. Where are you on social media, and how much followership do you have, and how active are you? You want to build your personal brand as a leader. But on the other hand, hey, listen, go out, take retreats, be reflective, go and do mindfulness and meditation. Be disconnected, right? Be connected, but also be disconnected. Be an extrovert, because leaders have to be very gregarious. They have to project a very outward energy. They have to, of course, be very people-oriented. But on the other hand, Susan Cain comes out with this book called Quiet, where she shows from the research the need for us to celebrate also the role of introversion, as a very powerful quality for success in leadership, because the introverts are more empathetic, they're able to be quieter, more observant, draw the energy out from the other person, connect more at a deeper level with people, etc. Do I be an introvert now, or do I be an extrovert now? A leader has to be very visionary, but at the same time, a leader also has to be not just having like their eyes, on the horizon, in the skies. They have to be having their feet on the ground, have to be very pragmatic. So do you notice what's going on here? Essentially, a leader today is someone that needs to be everything and the complete opposite. Does that make sense? Everything and the complete opposite, right? So what does that really tell us about what it takes and what it means to be a leader? Okay, so how do we get to that point of being able to give ourselves a viable path forward if the world is going to be so demanding of us, like we just said? And I want to offer a path forward to us today. And I want to sort of be inspired here by this quote from Einstein, where he says, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And the challenge we have with this model of leadership that we just spoke about is that it is a very outward model. It is a very external, exterior focused model. And maybe what we need to do is change our level of consciousness. Maybe what we need to do is actually turn the lens within. Maybe what we need to do is to realize that outside this portfolio, that beyond this portfolio of outer qualities, there lies something that we might call your inner core. And that is the place from where great leadership arises. What is this thing that I'm calling the inner core? The inner core is this space within you, within me, within each and every one of us, from where we can operate from a state of grace, if you want to call it, from a state of just openness to truth in whatever form it comes to us. It is the space of balance. It is the space where we can walk away from our own prejudices, from our own ego, insecurities, and attachments, to allow us to look very dispassionately, very purposefully, committed as we are to perhaps some larger end. If nothing else, our larger end is that we want to live a life well lived. We want to, nurture a great family. We want to make sure that the team and the organization that we are a part of is actually successful. We want to put something out there that is truly valued, by our customers. And all of these are, wonderful, selfless forms of purpose, for us to have. So that space of the inner core is where you are deeply committed to that purpose. You walked away from those kinds of insecurities and misjudgments and egos and attachments. And you're able to just bring the best of yourself. And you're able to say, look, I'm here joyfully to serve, to connect, to pursue purpose, to open myself up to truth, and also to be just sort of curious about what life holds in store. I mean, I'm coming in here with my convictions, but I also realize there's so much more to discover about the situation, about you, about this problem. And so I'm open and curious at the same time. So you bring this kind of healthy learner kind of curiosity as well to that moment. That is your inner core. And now, let me just ask you this. I mean, just think about it in your own case. Is it the case that from time to time, you see yourself coming closer to that peak performance state, where you feel that sense of just kind of joyful, peaceful, tranquil detachment from will it be this or will it be that? No, it can't be this. No, it won't be that. And you're able to take a much more clearer view of situations. You're able to waltz in and be this pillar of strength, sort of like this peaceful warrior, even in the midst of crazy kind of battles and challenges that you're facing in the world. When you think about it and when you realize that there are moments like that all of us have operated with, even though they may not be a firm and clear and anchored part of who we are, well, then that's a glimpse that you're getting about that potential within you, just like it is there within me, to pursue my inner core. Now, let me say this. In terms of this interaction that I'm having with you, at the present moment, I'm not able to see the chat window. My colleagues are, and they're going to bring up, through Scott, a couple of questions that I can hopefully interact with you on that you might raise, in the chat window. That said, I'm really interested in your thoughts and reactions to what we are sharing here. And I am going to be, after the conversation today, reviewing the chat window, all right? And so please use that as a medium through which to communicate. And I am looking forward to all the thoughts and ideas that I will get a chance to benefit from after these 30 minutes that we have together. All right, so now let me give you an example of one leader who operated from the inner core, right? So this is what was said of Lincoln by one of the historians who studied his life. Neither his perceptions nor his intellectual vision were perverted or distorted or diseased. He saw things through a perfect mental lens. There was no diffraction or refraction there. Look at this idea about he saw things through a perfect mental lens. How many people do you know and I know where you can look at them and say, wow, this is a person who always sees things through a perfect mental lens? Can we even say that about ourselves? And isn't that an aspect of that inner core, that universality, that it doesn't matter what situation you're in? In all situations, life is inviting you, whether you want to be a visionary or whether you want to be pragmatic, whether you want to be connected, whether you want to be disconnected, a risk taker or a risk manager. It doesn't matter. In any and all of the situations, why would we not want to approach life and leadership from a perfect mental lens? Now, if this is how Lincoln was on the inside, how was he like on the outside? What was his personality like? And here is what these historians have said about Lincoln on the outside. Of the multitudes of people who claim to have known him, there are no two who agree in their estimate of him. He seemed to open himself up to people in different directions. A very ambitious man, without an iota of ambition. One of the saddest men that has ever lived. One of the jolliest men that has ever lived. The most cunning man in America. Not an iota of cunning in him. A leader of the people. A leader always being led by the people. Cool and impassive. Susceptible to the strongest passions. Did you see what's going on here? Everything and the complete opposite, right? The more we are able to anchor ourselves in our core, the more we have the freedom to, on the outside, act out whatever is the appropriate behavior for that moment. That's what you learn from a life like Lincoln's. Now, we can unpack the inner core and we can actually identify within it 5 building blocks, as I've done in my research, I've done in my teaching here at Columbia and at Institute for Personal Leadership. And these 5 building blocks are these pillars of purpose, wisdom, love, growth, and self-realization. And I just want to have you keep that idea in mind so that it demystifies a little bit this notion of inner core for the rest of our conversation today together. Much as in the bounds of time we have, you're obviously not going to be able to do full justice to kind of looking at each of these pillars, right? But just keep these ideas and thoughts in your mind for today. And then if you want a deeper dive in this, well, that's what our executive education program here at Columbia, on personal leadership is about. That's what the online program that we have, at Columbia is about. That's what, the work we do at the Institute is about. For now, I'm just going to try to give you some glimpses, some hints and thoughts about the inner core, right? So, here is a basic model for how to lead. First step, go within. The second step, project out. In other words, if you're in any situation of challenge, of high stakesness in terms of what needs to happen, right, in that team meeting, in that review conversation with the subordinate, in that critical dialogue you're going to have with the board, etc. In any of those situations, before you start to plan it out and act it out and execute, go within. Connect with your core, because that is from where the best of you is going to arise. And once you do that, then project outward from that, trying to strive to stay as much connected to that inner core as possible all the way through. Let me give you 3 principles of the inner part of this journey and then 3 principles for the outer part of the journey. The inner part is what I call inner mastery. On the inside, one thesis I want to offer to you is that strive to go even deeper, even deeper, even deeper. It is in some ways a boundless journey. It is a journey ripe with such possibilities, such undiscovered possibilities, such undreamed of possibilities. And I see that in part through my personal journey, in part through the studies I've done of great leaders like a Mahatma Gandhi or a Mother Teresa or a Martin Luther King or even a Steve Jobs or a Warren Buffett, is that the kind of growth they achieved by striving to go deeper and deeper and deeper within is indicative of the untapped potential there is in all of us. Second thing I want to say is that it is not just about a single intervention in your life, this cultivation of the inner core. Today, for example, practices like journaling, practices like exercise, practices like yoga and mindfulness are becoming very, very popular, right? As kind of new age practices that connect us to our authentic self. Yes, but I would also say the following. If you are not looking at your whole life, if you are not looking at how you arrive in every moment, if you're not being observant and vigilant and thoughtful about where is the train of thoughts that I have during the day, what are the habits and addictions that either take me towards my core or take me away from my core, you're not going to be able to do full justice to your potential about this inner core. Because you can go and have an intervention for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes a day, but if the rest of your life is not also being tempered and managed and directed by this aspiration, and you're being fairly, in a sense, let's say, let me call it just, for use of a word, undisciplined there, you'll find it a challenge to really be able to fully tap into this thing called the inner core. The third is, ultimately where you want to get to is not where it's just a state that you achieve or experience when you do your practice of gratitude or when you sit and do some deep breathing. It is something that you ultimately want to get to a place of steadiness from within where it becomes a trait, it becomes a permanent part of you. And some of the latest research on practices like meditation are showing how over time they rewire your brain to the point where it's always a part of you. There's this undercurrent of the inner core that is running through every interaction, every conversation, every activity. Okay? The outer impact principles that I want to offer to you. In other words, when you go from the inside to the outside, when you have to act, in the big bad world out there and engage with life and with issues. The first is kind of what I just said a few minutes ago, which is make sure that if you are feeling challenged in those moments, that the first thing you do is not try to fix the outer problem, which is like, how can I make sure this person says or does what I want them to do? This team is like right now so, uninspired. What can I do about it? Or this problem is so complex. Before you start to grapple with those outer challenges, make sure to ask yourself, am I operating from my inner core? Am I operating from my inner core? And if you're not, then that's where you want to go first before you operate on the outside, because that's from where your best thinking, your most unbiased, your most sort of, clear, more learner-oriented, more connected, thinking will come. And again, there's a lot of research to support these ideas around, for example, how to nurture intuition in your life, how to nurture a discipline through which you do not have unconscious bias in life, etc. In some ways, it's all about one thing, the inner core. A second principle of how to have that outer impact, make sure that you unshackle yourself from 20th century mindsets. 20th century mindset said, I am this personality, and I take this personality test and it tells me who I am. Or some people are of good character, others are of bad character, and this is where I stand in this regard. No, 21st century psychology is showing us that in fact, within us there is, in some ways, boundless potential to evolve and grow when we put our energies in a certain direction. And so, if you identify yourself with the core, and on this outer shell part, you are unshackling yourself from any sense of singular identity. Because I am white, therefore this is the kind of behavior and mindset I have. Because I am, a woman, therefore this is the kind of mindset and behavior I have. Because I am old, therefore this is the kind of mindset. No. In my encouragement to you is throw that all out. Think of yourself as the inner core and think of yourself projecting on the outside. And yes, of course, there are things to learn. There are new behaviors to learn, but never feel confined to certain kinds of attributes just because you have defined your identity, along certain social demographic or personality or other variables. Master as wide a range of outer styles as you can. Not only confined to those that you define with your personality, like I'm an extrovert, therefore I can't do this other introvert stuff. No, 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 no. Master as much of those outer things as you can. And then you have the freedom to be able to sort of like go in a situation and kind of like do what is right in that situation, rather than have to be limited or confined by certain sort of just narrow definitions of this is what I've done always, therefore this is what I can do, and etc. Right? Okay. Couple of final thoughts before we wrap up. One is, what this does for us, this idea about inner core and the outer shell, inner mastery and outer impact, is it starts to invite us to actually create a new metric for what it means to be high performing as a leader. Instead of the outer metrics, which are about like, how am I behaving, right? Am I charismatic? Am I projecting my energy well? Am I inspiring people, etc.? You know what? Any and all of that will happen in a very authentic and integrated way when you're actually using the inner metric of how am I doing from the inside, right? And the inside story would be for you to ask yourself, which is, look, am I really connected with my core? Am I committed to my purpose? Am I masterful of my emotions, undistorted in my thoughts, deeply connected with my people, open to new learnings and growth? Anchored in the pure and joyful spirit that is there within me, right? And if so, well, then I'm operating from the core. Then I'm creating the conditions where I can bring the best of me, to the outside. And that's the last thought I want to, leave with you here. Last thought I want to leave with you. Scott is going to join us now, and we're going to talk some more. The questions that are on your mind as well. But yeah, I hope that was good, food for thought, just to start off our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Hitendra. That's great. A lot of wonderful information. We've gotten a bunch of questions coming in, so let's get started, shall we?
Let's do it.
One of the big questions, and I've seen a little bit of a theme coming through, is people, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about meditation. And one of the people who wrote in, Sarah, wrote, does meditation help you to develop your inner core? So if you can talk a little bit about meditation.
Yeah. I think if you think about the 5 pillars we spoke about, purpose, wisdom, love, growth, self-realization, any and all of those are pathways towards the inner core. Self-realization is the one of those 5 pillars that deals with meditation. And yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. You can use meditation, I would say, as almost like an accelerating force towards your inner core. Mm-hmm. It is in some ways the most direct method, because what you're doing is simplifying the outer conditions of life, right, and really going into your inner lab and learning through personal experiments and personal experience as to how you see your consciousness, your sense of identity, your capacity to unconditionally tap into an inner resource of tranquility, love, joy. Right. And what's really remarkable about meditation is that not just does it lead you to develop this greater kinship with your core, right? You also start to realize through it 2 things. First of all, you start to realize, I am not developing my core. What you start to realize is like, this has always been me. It has always been in me. I just have to improve my knowing. Mm-hmm. And that is a tremendously reassuring and empowering thing.
You need to improve your...
my knowing. In other words, like, it's like this thing that is always there, but I just haven't paid attention to it.
Right.
And so that's very empowering and reassuring to know it's been your friend, it's been with you. You just need to get to connect more with it. So that's one part. Right. But the other part that happens is that when you start to discover that capacity to stay in that state of grace in your own self, you start to realize, hey, this has nothing to do with me being old or young, with me being, somebody whose body is like this or like that, with me feeling like this is because my color of skin is this or that, or my gender is this or that. And then you start realizing, if this is me, then this is that person, then this is that person, then this is that person. And you suddenly feel like, oh, wow, there is this, in a sense, like this divine spark, this inner core that must exist in all of humanity. Right. And now, how can you, in a moment like that, maintain, let's say, bias, in your mind, stereotypes in your mind and all that, when you know that hidden potential that you are discovering in yourself also exists in people around you. So some of the challenges we're facing in society today, which are truly, to me, personal leadership challenges. They're challenges about each of us bringing out our best leadership, to me, could be in some ways, addressed indirectly, not by going out there and shouting your truth, which I respect that, because there's a lot of important issues that need to be addressed. But it's also about going in and listening to the whispers of truth from within.
Right. Connect with yourself to connect with others.
Yeah.
I mean, really, and connect with yourself in a peaceful way.
Yeah.
Well, it's very difficult, and I think people. We have about 5 minutes left. I know. Did you want to do a poll? With the audience?
Let's do that.
Let's do a poll. So
okay, fantastic.
Tell us about that.
All right. So we're going to put a poll in front of you, and we are trying to kind of get us, to check your pulse, right, as to how this idea of the inner core, relates to you or not, right? And maybe we are getting to be on target here across this community, or maybe we are way off target. Let's listen to you. Wonderful. Okay, so here's what we're hearing. 25% of you are saying, I understand this notion and I strive to operate from it. It's something like you're coming into this conversation with already some attunement to it. And another 40% or so are saying, look, I'm occasionally able to operate from it. So I sense it, I get it. Occasionally I'm able to access it, but not as frequently as I'd like. 20% are acknowledging that, look, I struggle to go within and operate from it, even though I understand it. And another 16% are saying, look, I don't yet have a good enough understanding. I respect that, and then about 1%, 5 of you are saying that, I don't really relate much to this notion at all. I respect that as well. So thank you for answering that. In fact, let's do we have one more poll. Let's do that as well.
Would you like that?
I'd be curious to see where you are on that. And then, we're going to wrap it up in the last couple of minutes, but let's do this next poll as well.
Wonderful.
20% of you are saying that I have a much better understanding of my inner core. Another 80% or 77% are saying that I have a much deeper appreciation of how this inner game really affects my outer game. 16% are saying I've not really gained any meaningful new learnings, but I've gained valuable reinforcement of learnings, which often I find in some of my workshops as well, that executives will come up and say, you know what, Hitendra, this really ties so well with these things I've learned from my faith or from my culture or from my own practice and management and et cetera. And then about 3% are saying that I don't yet feel comfortable in accepting the ideas, which is, I respect that very much, because I myself am like that. Often when I listen to something which is quite new and challenging, I need to percolate, with it in my mind for a while. And sometimes it'll be like a year later, 2 years later. The important thing to me is that you are in some ways owning your truth. You are aspiring to make for yourself the path forward and this relationship, if you like, with this thing called the inner core that will work best, and authentically for you. Turn it back to you, Scott, for any final thoughts.
We have about 30 seconds left, and we have a lot of questions that we'll get to, and the conversation continues following this webinar. We'll be sending that to you. But in 30 seconds, can you just tell us, what is the first thing somebody can do today to begin this process?
Yeah. Take personal responsibility over your inner state before you start to fix the outer state. It is so easy for us to get embroiled in, I got to fix, my child. I got to fix the world. I got to fix this team. It's my responsibility. I have that burden because I'm at this stage of my career and life, and I've done my hard work. I've gone through college and school and all that. So now it's for me to give. First, give to yourself by putting yourself into that place of mastery as much as you can, whether it is through mindfulness and meditation, whether it's through reflections, whether it's through emotional mastery, whatever it takes. And in any situation where you struggle with what's going on, always first start by asking yourself, and I've seen this so many times, I have people who we coach, and who come therefore for counsel now and then. And one of the things we do at our institute, for example, in our coaching, is the first thing that we are inviting, those individuals to have when they're grappling with some influencing issue at work or some other career challenges, like, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? What is your connection with your purpose? Nurture that inner core first, because then you will be in the best position to use your wisdom to come up with the best answer. So personal responsibility.
Great, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hitendra. Again, we have a lot of questions that we'll get to, and the conversation continues. Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you, Professor Wadhwa.
I'm very grateful that all of you taking the time from your life to make this happen. Thank you for allowing us to keep this dialogue going with all of you. And I'm very grateful to the Columbia team, by the way, that has been fabulous, and our Institute of Personal Leadership team in putting this together. A lot of work went behind the scenes from a lot of them. So thank you all as well. Thank you for joining us.
Have a good day.